And now, in a major escalation in West Asia conflict, Iran claims that it has directly targeted a U.S. aircraft carrier. Tehran says that it fired a volley of cruise missiles at the USS Abraham Lincoln.
Iranian forces say they targeted the U.S. aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln.
That the United States has gone on to clarify and say that the carrier Abraham Lincoln is continuing operations. That's right. Remember that earlier Iran had claimed to have hit the USS carrier Abraham Lincoln.
As tensions rise with Iran, the stakes couldn't be higher. Iran says it's watching. An Iranian Navy commander even warned.
0438 hours, Strait of Hormuz, T-minus 9 minutes until impact. One Qadr family ballistic missile. More than 5,000 sailors and aviators inside the crosshairs. Every second counts. This is the story of 9 minutes that were supposed to cripple a U.S. aircraft carrier, and instead became a ruthless demonstration of how modern naval war is really fought. The target is the USS Abraham Lincoln, CVN-72, a Nimitz-class supercarrier operating in the U.S. Fifth Fleet area of responsibility, where every mile of sea is strategic and every radar pulse matters. The Lincoln is not sailing alone. No carrier ever does. Around her, an outer ring of Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers holds station with Aegis combat systems already awake, already scanning, already sharing every track in real time. Above her, an E-2D Advanced Hawkeye is orbiting in a lazy, almost peaceful pattern. On deck, carrier air wing fighters, Super Hornets, and in this scenario F-35CS, sit armed, fueled, and chained down against the warm Gulf wind. Below the waterline, 2 nuclear reactors drive more than 100,000 tons of steel through one of the most politically explosive waterways on Earth. Imagine you are standing on the Lincoln's island catwalk at that moment. The sky is still dark enough to hide the horizon. Tankers are moving east. The smell is jet fuel, salt, and hot metal. Somewhere below, cooks are serving breakfast. Somewhere above, a Hawkeye crew is watching 360 degrees of empty air. It does not feel like the beginning of a missile attack. It feels routine. That's the dangerous part, because the Strait of Hormuz is never just water. It is leverage. It is pressure. It is a choke point through which a massive share of the world's seaborne energy traffic still moves. Every American carrier that passes through it is not just a ship. It is a strategic message. And in this fictional scenario, Tehran decides that message has gone far enough. The weapon selected is a Qadr family medium-range ballistic missile, sometimes rendered in outside references as Al-Qadr, a real Iranian missile type with liquid fuel propulsion, a range measured in the high hundreds to nearly 2,000 kilometers, depending on variant, and a reputation built on threatening strategic land targets at speed. That last detail matters. Fixed targets, air bases, infrastructure, cities, not a moving carrier strike group changing course and speed in a cluttered maritime environment. But the political logic inside Tehran does not care about engineering nuance. It cares about symbolism. The calculation is brutally simple. One heavy warhead on an American flight deck, one crater, one burning aircraft elevator, one image of smoke pouring from a U.S. carrier in the Strait of Hormuz. That image would travel further than the missile itself. It would tell every regional capital that carriers can bleed. It would tell domestic audiences that Iran can hit back. It would tell oil markets that no passage in the Gulf is safe if Tehran chooses otherwise. And so the order is given. The launch crew is operating from inland terrain northwest of Bandar Abbas, where hardened shelters, fueling vehicles, and a transporter erector launcher have spent hours preparing the missile. That right there is the flaw in the plan. Liquid-fueled ballistic missiles are dangerous. They are also cumbersome. They need time, convoys, heat signatures, support trucks, movement, communication, everything you would avoid if you were trying to hide from a surveillance architecture built specifically to watch missile forces. What they did not account for was how many eyes were already on them. Hours before the launch, infrared missile warning satellites had already noticed abnormal heat activity around the launch zone. Signals intelligence had already logged a burst of encrypted traffic between the local missile brigade and an operations node near Bandar Abbas. A USMQ-4C Triton, flying outside Iranian airspace, had already correlated vehicle movement patterns around the site, and aboard the Lincoln, that information had already moved through the strike group's network, quietly, professionally, without drama. While Tehran believed it was preparing a surprise, the carrier group was already building the file. There's a problem with their plan, and it is lethal. To hit a carrier at sea with a ballistic missile, you do not just need a launch. You need a valid moving target solution. You need to know where the ship will be minutes later, not where it is now. You need to account for course changes, speed changes, electronic warfare, and a layered defense network built precisely to punish ballistic trajectories. Tehran believes one missile, fired fast enough and from deep enough inland, can outrun that complexity. It believes speed alone can close the gap. But while Tehran believes the missile is the predator, the Lincoln's defensive architecture is already stalking it before it ever leaves the launcher. At 0438:41, the Qadr ignites. The boost plume is violent. A pillar of orange-white exhaust punches out of the dark Iranian interior, and within seconds that heat bloom is picked up by space-based infrared warning sensors. The alert does not crawl through a bureaucracy. It detonates through a network. Combat systems aboard the nearest Aegis destroyer receive the cue almost instantly. The Hawkeye pivots its attention. The Lincoln's Combat Information Center shifts from routine posture to full engagement mode in under half a minute. General quarters sounds through the ship, not as panic, but as choreography. Thousands of people move from sleep, maintenance, breakfast, and flight prep into combat stations because that is what carriers are built to do. You are there now. Red lighting, repeated alarms, voices clipped and calm. A missile track forming on a display before most of the crew has even had time to fully absorb the word incoming. The destroyer on the threat axis, its radar now locked onto the ascending missile, begins constructing the engagement geometry. Altitude, speed, probable impact basket. The Lincoln alters course by 6 degrees. Not much, just enough to complicate the final solution. The Hawkeye pushes updated track data through the network. An airborne fighter pair north of the formation turns toward the Iranian coast, not to intercept the missile. That is not their job, but to prepare for what comes after. Minute 1. The missile climbs. Fast, hot, unmistakable. Minute 2. The Aegis destroyer has a firing solution. Minute 3. 2 SM. 3 interceptors leave their vertical launch cells in a roar of flame and smoke, spearing upward to attack the Qadr in mid-course. This is not cinematic dogfighting. This is mathematics at hypersonic speed. Hit geometry, timing windows, pure collision logic high above the Gulf. The first interceptor fails to complete the kill. The second does something more important. It clips the missile body at exoatmospheric altitude, tearing away shielding, destabilizing the warhead section, and breaking the clean ballistic track Tehran needed. Not a total kill. Not yet, but what remains is tumbling, descending, damaged, and still dangerous. This is where weak defenses fail. One layer, one shot, one answer, and the missile might still get through. But the Lincoln is not defended by one answer. It is defended by a sequence. Minute 4. The damaged warhead re-enters. Minute 5. It is still coming down hard, still on a threatening vector, though less stable than before. The destroyer's combat system hands the track to the next layer. SM-6 takes over. That is what makes modern naval defense so terrifyingly efficient. Mid-course layer degrades the threat. Terminal layer takes the handoff. One sensor feeds the next. One weapon window closes and another opens. The missile does not get a second chance to surprise anyone. 2 SMSIXS launch. You can feel those launches in your chest from the flight deck. The concussion, the sudden violence, the realization that this is no longer theory. This is real. Somewhere inside the carrier, a young sailor is gripping a handrail so hard his knuckles are white. Somewhere in the air, a Hawkeye controller is counting seconds. Somewhere on the Iranian side, launch officers are waiting for impact confirmation that will never come. The first SM-6 climbs, turns, and drives into terminal pursuit. The second rides a slightly offset geometry. The descending warhead, unstable, hot, shedding pieces, is now lower than the first engagement layer, and entering the envelope the terminal defense was built to own. At 0446:57, the first SM-6 detonates close enough to shred the warhead body. At 0447:02, the second passes through the debris cloud and confirms the kill. What falls into the water is not a strike package. It is scrap, metal, burning fragments, pieces of a strategic message breaking apart over the Strait of Hormuz. The nearest debris splashes down miles off the Lincoln's port quarter. No hit, no crater, no flames on the flight deck, no viral victory for Tehran. But that is not the thing that shocks the world, because at 0447:05, 9 minutes from initial alert to confirmed kill, the response is already in motion. Not debated, not delayed, already moving. This is the part most people misunderstand about carrier warfare. The defense is not the end of the story. It is the opening act. Once attribution is clear, Once the launch site is confirmed, once the strike group knows who fired and from where, the question is no longer can we survive this. The question is how much of the enemy's launch chain still exists 10 minutes from now. 2 F-35CS already airborne push inland at low observable profile, carrying targeting updates from the Hawkeye and the strike group network. An EA-18G Growler launches and begins climbing to suppress Iranian coastal radar coverage. The destroyers align Tomahawk strike packages, not on vague regional coordinates, but on the exact launch ecosystem. The transporter erector launcher site, the fueling trucks, the command van, the communications bunker, and the radar relay that fed the target queue. This is where the phrase systematic erasure becomes real. At 0448, the first Tomahawks launch. At 0450, Super Hornets are airborne. At 0452, the Growler is already pushing jamming effects against coastal surveillance radars, still trying to understand why their missile never reported terminal impact. The launch crew that fired the Qadr has almost no time to relocate. Liquid fuel launch operations leave a footprint: vehicles, hoses, support gear, thermal residue, communications emissions. You do not just fire and vanish. Not under this much surveillance. Not against a carrier group already oriented toward retaliation. The first Tomahawk reaches the launch area, while the tail is still attempting to displace. The warhead lands just behind the cab, flipping the launcher, tearing through the support convoy, and igniting remaining fuel and oxidizer in a white-hot flash visible for miles. Seconds later, a second Tomahawk collapses the communications node coordinating the missile brigade. A third destroys the field operations bunker. Dams from incoming Super Hornets finish the radar relay site. The Growler's jamming isolates everything else. 9 minutes to survive the missile. Minutes more to begin removing the people and machines who launched it. Not a battle. Not a warning shot. A purge. From Tehran's perspective, the operation was supposed to be a calculated demonstration. Fire one missile. Show reach. Survive the political shockwave. Instead, it becomes a technological showcase for exactly why trying to use a medium-range ballistic missile built around fixed-target logic against a moving U.S. carrier is a strategic miscalculation of the highest order. And there's one more twist. The Qadr strike was meant to force the Lincoln backward, out of the strait, into a defensive posture. It achieves the opposite. Within an hour of the failed attack and the retaliatory strike, the carrier strike group resumes transit with air operations continuing. Commercial traffic that had slowed in anticipation of escalation begins moving again under escort windows. The missile that was supposed to close the waterway ends up accelerating the American demonstration that the waterway can still be held open under fire. That is what shocks the world. Not just that the missile failed. Missiles fail. Intercepts happen. The real shock is speed. 9 minutes from launch to kill confirmation. Minutes more to begin dismantling the launch chain. The compression of the entire event into less time than a coffee break is what changes the picture. How many missiles did Iran launch in this scenario? 1. How many reached the carrier? None. How long did the attack survive as a real threat? Less than 9 minutes. How long did the launch infrastructure survive after that? Not much longer. The ratio tells its own story. Their single ballistic strike met a layered shield of satellites, Hawkeye battle management, Aegis computation, mid-course interception, terminal defense, and then a carrier air wing and Tomahawk response package that multiplied the cost of that decision almost instantly. There is a lesson here, and it is not just about American technology. It is about doctrine. Iran's missile force is real. Its ballistic inventory is real. Its regional reach is real. But the Qadr family was built to threaten fixed infrastructure, not to reliably kill a maneuvering supercarrier under a fully networked naval air and missile defense umbrella. Trying to use it that way is not innovation. It is desperation wrapped in symbolism. And symbols do not survive layered fire control. Modern naval warfare is no longer about one weapon beating one ship. It is about whether a nation can close a complete kill chain faster than the other side can break it. In this scenario, Tehran closes the first part, launch. The United States closes everything after that. Detection, tracking, interception, attribution, retaliation, end-to-end, in minutes. So here's the real question. How does this change your view of modern warfare, especially the idea that a single dramatic strike can still alter the balance against a fully integrated carrier group? Share your take. Subscribe to join the discussion.